Depression is one of the most commonly diagnosed psychological disorders. 1 in 5 adults experience depression, women twice as likely. Symptoms of major depressive disorder include excessive weight loss or gain, sleeplessness and sleepiness, insomnia, feelings of worthlessness, anhedonia, lack of sexual appetite, difficulty thinking and concentrating, persistent mood, sad mood, suicidal thoughts, or death for a 2-week period or longer. So for patients with mild to moderate depressive symptoms, typically they're on antidepressants. They've tried multiple antidepressants. They can be beneficial, but they're not necessarily a foolproof treatment for depression. There's lots of breakthrough symptoms and issues with medication. So medication side effects we see are anxiety, loss of appetite, sexual dysfunction, also issues with people not responding or developing a tolerance. Most of the patients that I see, they're coming in with diagnosed depression disorder. Um, Most of them have been on multiple medications. They're on a medication. They're looking for something else to support some breakthrough symptoms or symptoms that are happening because of the side effect of medication. So I would say definitely these are some great tools we're going to share with you today. Maybe we're all kind of familiar with it at this point, our omega-3s. Your brain is 60% fat. So if you're thinking about healthy, like synaptic interactions, healthy neuronal interactions, healthy neurotransmitter crossing phospholipid membrane interactions, you want to think about healthy fats. And so definitely I would say this is one like tried and true for depression. So omega-3 fatty acids, particularly the EPA, DHA, icosapentaenoic, docosahexaenoic, play many roles in brain health and brain function. One thing they do is they optimize cell membrane fluidity. So at the molecular level, omega-3s act as agonists for several important receptors and transcription factors. They can downregulate inflammation by inhibiting that NFKB, that nuclear factor kappa B, through effects on the toll-like receptors, or by binding to the PPAR, this peroxisome gamma type of receptor that can also upregulate positive pathways. And so I would definitely say that the toll-like receptors are a huge pathway for evaluating inflammatory scenarios in the body. So if you're interested in, toll-like receptors, or if you're interested in just like general inflammation pathways, I would say take a look into the toll-like receptors because there's many strategies you can use to turn those down. One is omega-3s. One is also supporting a healthy gut microbiome and gut health as well. So I would definitely say that's something to think about. And then, the first one I mentioned, optimizing the cell membrane fluidity. You want to have good fluidity or good movement between those cell membranes so those neurotransmitters are properly communicating or properly, getting where they need to go. And so if you have think about rigid cells, like under this being in school, I had a teacher who would say, if your brain is mostly fat or your cell membranes are fat, you want to have healthy fats. If you're eating mostly trans fats or hydrogenated oils or really crappy processed fats, think about those cellular membranes and what they're being made up of and how they're not likely able to kind of optimally function transmitting what they need to transmit. So healthy fats are crucial. Omega-3s also influence gene expression in the brain. They support mitochondrial function. They alter the mitochondrial membrane phospholipid compositions. That's a composition of lipids in the mitochondrial membranes, which mitochondria is obviously our energy cell, helps to crank out that ATP that we need. So we need healthy omega-3s for not just kind of cellular membranes, but also helping with intercellular membranes as well. Supplementation with EPA and DHA in the mitochondrial membrane can increase cardiolipin, which is a phospholipid critical for optimal mitochondrial activity. Some studies show that omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids enhance antioxidant capacity by boosting the activity of glutathione and the superoxide dismutase enzymes, so the antioxidant system. So again, another reason to have this is not just, oh, omega-3s are great for brain health. Well, they work in so many different ways. It's kind of crucial to have our patients on these when they have mental health disorders because our body does not naturally produce the EPA DHA, so we have to get it from our diet. So they're not eating a diet with fatty fish and they're maybe, I don't know, just eating protein here and there, and it's not really the best quality protein. They may be missing out on an opportunity to get some of these potent omegas in. And then lastly, omega-3 support neuronal signaling, neuroplasticity, gene regulation, inflammation resolution, mitochondrial function, and obviously antioxidant defenses, like we mentioned. This is one that I like to use. I actually have used the Nordic Naturals brand, I don't know, for 10 years now. I mean, they're just a really great brand. They're a quality brand, well-tested brand. And so I recommend Nordic Naturals a lot. I also use the Seroyal brand, Seroyal, the Genestra, Genestra. It's like Seroyal slash Genestra. I think it's the same company. I use them too because you can get a really nice liquid formulation. So if you are kind of, titrating the dose, and, two of these soft gels, they're kind of on the larger side. They're not, I don't think they're too large, but if your patients are only used to taking like over-the-counter prescriptions, which are usually tinier capsules or tablets, this might be a little bigger for them, so they may be okay with like a liquid. So the Seroyal Genestra brand, which we didn't put in here, but that's a great liquid option, and you can do, titrate it up. You want to do 4 grams or 4,000 milligrams, or, play with the dose a bit. It's a great option for that. Okay, so our next thing is saffron, which is, I'm obsessed with saffron for mood and brain depression. Saffron has been studied for its antidepressant effects, which appear to work in ways similar to conventional antidepressants by influencing these key neurotransmitters in the brain, particularly serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that's helping to regulate our mood. Now, while the exact mechanism isn't fully understood, saffron may inhibit the reuptake of serotonin in the synaptic cleft, which is a space between neurons. This means that there's going to be more serotonin remaining active in the brain for longer and potentially improving these depressive symptoms. Animal studies have supported this effect, showing antidepressant activity from extracts derived from multiple parts, of the saffron plant. The medicinal properties of saffron are thought to be from several of its bioactive compounds. They're like called the quercetin, crocin, safranol. And they're basically compounds with really strong antioxidant and radical scavenging property, which helps to protect the brain against reactive oxygen species and pro-inflammatory cytokines. However, it does remain unclear which specific components are responsible for its mood-enhancing effects. Clinical trials included in a meta-analysis suggest that saffron is an effective short-term treatment for major depressive disorder. Reported side effects were generally mild and included headaches, nausea. Importantly, in trials, comparing saffron to placebo, there's no significant difference in adverse events, indicating good tolerability. However, most of the studies were only 6 to 8 weeks in duration. So long-term safety and efficacy still don't know. But I love recommending saffron for a lot of my patients. You can do it as like an add-on for if they're already on other integrative protocols and they want just one more kind of tool. You can also, if they're on prescriptions, just have them chat with their doctor about kind of using this along with their prescriptive medication. Preliminary research suggests that saffron may help to improve depression symptoms in non-clinical populations. For example, a different analysis by a group found that 8 weeks of saffron improved mood in women experiencing PMS syndrome compared to placebo. And overall, saffron can be a promising natural strategy for supporting the mood and alleviating depressive symptoms. We obviously need more research, but let's look at this study. So in this study, a meta-analysis involving 12 studies of participants with mild to moderate depression. The doses were variable, but I would say typically you see around 30 milligrams. That's commonly used and studied. Control was either placebo or actual antidepressant medications. And overall, the results show that saffron possessed better efficacy in the improvement of depressive symptoms when compared with placebo, whereas saffron was as effective as synthetic antidepressants. No significant difference was detected in the incidence of adverse events between saffron and placebo or between saffron and antidepressants. So a really nice study. This was 2020 in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease. So the study is there if you want to take a deeper dive into that one. It can be considered an alternative to synthetic depressants in the treatment of mild to moderate depression. However, multi-center trials with larger sample sizes, longer treatment durations, different ethnic groups are obviously needed to kind of verify the results of this study, but some interesting results nonetheless. This is a product that I often use. This is by Dr. Amen. He's a MD neurologist, so he has a really great lens on formulation. I like his formulations. And then, it's just a really great company. So I would definitely say this is one that has 30 milligrams of saffron. So if you're considering, hey, I want to consider saffron for a patient, what product would I use? I would recommend this one. There are plenty of other ones, but one thing you want to look for is kind of a standardized dose of the actual extract. 30 milligrams. And the curcumin piece is a nice supportive agent too, but you don't necessarily need that. And then it does have a little bit of zinc in here. So if your patients are also taking other formulas with zinc, you want to be cautious of like too much zinc. The max amount of zinc, which is kind of characterized by the National Institutes of Health, is like, I think 40 or around 40 milligrams a day. So if your patients are taking, immune support, they're taking multivitamins, or they're taking other mineral supports, they may be kind of maxing out on some of that. So I would just kind of keep an eye on that. So St. John's wort, which is another botanical that I think is fabulous for depression, which is commonly used in Europe, but not as much in the States. So St. John's wort, aka Hypericum porphyratum, is a flowering plant native to Europe and Asia, widely used as an over-the-counter herbal remedy for depression and anxiety. The plant contains a variety of bioactive compounds, including anthraquinones, which basically are anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, other properties too. It has antidepressant and anxiolytics. You can use it for depression, anxiety. Most commonly are the most common indications for St. John's wort. Now, it's generally considered safe when used alone, which is really important here, because one of the main risks of St. John's wort is its potential to interact dangerously with other antidepressant medications, specifically combining it with drugs that affect the serotonin and inhibit the monoamine oxidase enzyme, which can lead to serotonin syndrome, which is usually too much serotonin. So it's a potentially life-threatening condition. So serotonin syndrome usually begins with like increased heart rate, so tachycardia, increased blood pressure, the mydriasis, so dilated pupils, excessive sweating. In more severe cases, it can cause like high fever with body temp going above 106, along with kind of muscle rigidity, confusion. So because of these risks, we typically don't recommend combining it with other serotonergic antidepressants without medical supervision. And so I just never will combine it. If a patient wants to try St. John's wort, I'm always going through their history. What else are you taking? Making sure they're not taking any other prescriptions. If so, you do not need to take this. Let's try saffron, or let's try omegas. Let's do other things in lieu of that. So this is the 2024 illustration from the journal Pharmaceuticals, looking at how synthetic antidepressants, so you'll see them listed there on the right in the orange, and extracts of hypericum, commonly known as St. John's wort, which is in the green, are performed in the treatment of depression. The analysis looked at response rates amongst patients taking St. John's wort, synthetic antidepressant, or placebo. Results were measured using the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, which assesses the severity of depressive symptoms. A responder is defined as a patient whose score decreased by at least 50% after treatment. The findings highlight that St. John's wort and its various extracts demonstrate comparable efficacy to standard antidepressant medications with fewer reported side effects and generally better patient tolerance. So it has deep roots in ethnopharmacology, which is the study of the traditional use of plants in medicine, particularly in Europe, where it's prescribed or has been prescribed for centuries to treat depression and anxiety. In modern clinical practice, it remains one of the most commonly used herbal antidepressants in countries like Germany, where it's often prescribed as an alternative or adjunct to conventional antidepressant therapies. So studies consistently show that St. John's wort is more effective than a placebo for treating mild to moderate depression with a lower incidence of adverse events compared to many synthetic drugs. Although the exact mechanism of its antidepressant action is still being clarified, research suggests that St. John's wort works through multiple neurochemical pathways. Its key bioactive compounds, including hyperforin, hypericin, and other flavonoids, influence neurotransmitter systems. So these compounds inhibit the reuptake of important mood-regulating neurotransmitters such as serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, GABA, and L-glutamate. By preventing these neurotransmitters from being rapidly reabsorbed by neurons, St. John's wort helps to increase their availability in the synaptic cleft, which is the space between the nerve cells, so much like the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, do. There's also evidence that St. John's wort may affect monoamine oxidase activity, which is another important biochemical pathway in mood regulation. It's an enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. So compounds in St. John's wort, like hypericin, hyperforin, quercetin, and other flavonoids, may inhibit both in the monoamine oxidase A and B enzymes, which would obviously prolong the activity of these neurotransmitters. However, the strength and consistency of these effects, especially regarding dopamine and norepinephrine, are still under investigation, and the exact molecular mechanisms remain partly unknown. So, overall, the body of evidence suggests that St. John's wort acts through a multifaceted network of neurotransmitter and enzymatic pathways, offering antidepressant effects that mirror and, in some cases, rival those of conventional medicine, while generally producing fewer side effects and a lower risk of tolerance or dependence. So this is a product that I like to use. It's by Gaia, which is a great botanical company. So they've been around for a while. It's an organic product and it has about 300 milligrams. So if you go back, the amount of St. John's wort that typically is used in studies is about 300 milligrams 2 to 3 times per day for a total of 600 to 900 milligrams daily. So this one has 333 milligrams of St. John's wort. It includes the aerial parts, and just it tells you the amount of hypericins in there as well. So you'll see in some studies they kind of look for a certain amount of hypericins, which are those important flavonoid or components of the plants that have been studied. So this is another one. There are plenty other St. John's wort formulas out there, and I would definitely say that you can take your pick of which one you like. This is just a company I have used for a while. I know it's a reputable brand, and so yeah.